Before I really dive into Genshin Impact and talk about its positives and negatives, there's some things we need to chat about. Genshin Impact is first and foremost a mobile game. Second and thirdly, it is a waifu simulator and casino. The developers MiHoYo are making their console and PC debut with Genshin, and a quick look at the monetization and structure makes that very clear. I tell you this in order to temper your expectations a bit because us Westerners have gotten accustomed to a certain way live service games are handled. You might be a little confused because the marketing and initial trailers that sparked the Zelda controversy led most people to believe it was a full-price JRPG. Then came the facts. It's made by a Chinese mobile developer and it's free to play. So naturally the game uses a Gacha system, which is a glorified Japanese loot box. The drop rates for getting the best characters and weapons are on the level of CS:GO knives. With very little hyperbole, it's a system which routinely plunges grown men into debt gambling on anime girls. The game is also not at all finished, and I imagine it will look totally different in a year or two. While the current open world is big, it's only 2 zones out of the planned 7. Each zone has a bunch of characters you can potentially play as, a storyline, side quests, bosses, an elemental alignment, etc. So yeah, there's a lot planned for the game, and with how quickly players are reaching the quote-unquote end game, it's clear they didn't design this for Western MMO warriors. You know, the guys who play a game until there's literally nothing left to do, then continue to play 4 hours a day, all the while complaining that the game is boring. Genshin Impact is essentially an episodic game, similar to all the other mobile gacha games where the story is slowly doled out over the years. It's an interactive anime, complete with fan service and filler. So to wrap this long disclaimer up, play Genshin Impact until you've seen all there is to currently see and stop. It's not a super deep and rewarding RPG, it's a fun and casual open world action game, and I really like it. So without further ado, let's review Gacha Impact: Breath of the Waifu. Playing Genshin Impact is a delight. I don't feel that way about a lot of games, but it's a pretty apt word to describe the combat and exploration. Difficulty is basically non-existent, but I have a sneaking suspicion this is another knock-on effect of it being a game most people are playing on their phones. Using a virtual joystick and buttons probably isn't conducive to a Dark Souls or Devil May Cry level of precision. Regardless, it's a fun smack 'em up where you swap between 4 characters, probably cute girls, using their basic and charged attacks, elemental abilities, and ultimates. So while each individual character has very little depth, swapping between weapon types, elements, and ranged or melee makes for a system that's just complex enough to keep me entertained. However, the main drawback of combat is that leveling only serves to increase stats and introduce ability modifiers, not new skills. Characters are also locked to using one type of weapon, so there's not that much in terms of build diversity. Thankfully, there's no weapon durability to worry about, so I guess that settles which is the better game. Ugh. Make no mistake, this is not a loot game. It's a feeding game. There are very few weapons in the game, with each category only containing about 20 unique weapons. Like characters, Genshin will see the introduction of many new swords over the years, but the category is pretty sparse at the moment. You will find loot along your journey, but nearly all of it will go towards feeding your hungry gear of choice to boost its power. This includes your characters who require a rigorous regimen of reading in order to level up. Reach a certain level and you need to gather more materials to ascend and continue leveling up. The reason I say it's not really a loot game is because the most powerful weapons are only found within the game's loot boxes.
Okay.
Everything else, trash. That's not to say opening chests isn't rewarding, because everything you gather can at least be used to level up your existing gear or waifu. That is to say, however, that because it's not a loot game, you can't really compare it to Destiny or World of Warcraft. Once you reach the level cap or finish all of the available quests, there's not much to do as the loot farming is almost non-existent or completely pointless. I guess this is as good a time as ever to talk about the end game and the community's problems with it. If you are a particularly obsessed or monetarily invested player, you will attempt to wring out every drop of Genshin's content to very little reward. The primary issue is that grinding materials needed for leveling is gated behind a daily resin resource. You'll eventually reach a point where you've done everything, and this resin is designed to slow players down until the next update. Many of these complaints that you see from fans are issues that you will either never deal with, or you will only encounter once you've put about 30 hours into the game. For the purposes of this review, I will just make the disclaimer that this game will not replace Warframe or Destiny. It's not designed to either. If you go in thinking this will be your next main game that you play every night, you might want to wait a year or just temper your expectations. Alright, back to the game. Along your adventure, you'll be doing a lot of adventuring. That means lots of stamina-based exploration. You're burdened with a suspiciously familiar stamina meter which lets you know when you've flown, climbed, or swam for too long. Anything and everything is climbable, and you need but an inch of incline to start gliding. It's a familiar system. It works, but just like the combat, it's missing a touch more depth. There's a distinct lack of physics, for instance, so when you stop gliding, you just fall straight to the ground. There's no mounts to speak of, which seems like a huge missed opportunity for the gacha, so you're going to be sprinting everywhere. It's serviceable, jolly, delightful, but I could go for more options, especially in a game as magical as this. For instance, I would love for every character to have some dedicated elemental movement ability. This would mix up both combat and exploration. You'll also take part in regular puzzles, often requiring you to use a specific element. This is one that I really don't mind the difficulty being low because my brain no work good. I hate getting stuck on a puzzle only to look it up because at that point it's just an inconvenience, like something getting in your way. Genshin's puzzles aren't mind benders, but they're just enough to make you go, oh. They're nice, fun to take part in, and plentiful. While the grass and enemies might look familiar, the world of Teyvat should be celebrated. Like I said in the beginning, we only have access to 2 of the 7 zones, so it's hard to give some sort of final verdict. As far as I know, there's no volcano or desert or lightning castle of doom. The land of wind and earth are kind of what you'd expect. Swaying fields of tall grass, colorful hillsides, tall mountains, and waterfalls. Combined with the day-night cycle and the incredible music, I constantly find myself having these moments of just The developers have made a wondrous world to exist in, even when you're just taking in the sights and sounds. This is by far my favorite part of Genshin. While not quite on the level of Breath of the Wild, I experienced eerily similar moments of awe. Every time I enter a new area, it just calls out to me, begging to be explored. It's what makes the game so hard to put down. After unlocking a chest or collecting a special orb, you're bound to see another one deviously placed in order to keep you playing. Fight some enemies, solve a puzzle, open a chest, repeat. You'd think it would get boring, but not when the world is this nice. Genshin Impact knows what it's doing, and it knows its audience. It's a sexy game, but not overtly horny like other anime games. Out of the 23 playable characters currently in the game, only 9 of them are male, and that's if you choose to play as the brother in the beginning. All of them, the boys and the girls, are very cutesy. This is to be expected, but when all of your characters are thin, pretty, and soft, the effect is greatly diminished. When everyone is cute, nobody stands out as such. Street Fighter is a much hornier game, but it's also more masculine, muscular, ugly, and diverse. Huge wrestlers facing off against Brazilian jiu-jitsu hotties, shredded Cammy smacking cutesy Sakura around, downright ugly characters next to beautiful badasses. What I'm saying is there's a distinct lack of different body types. Big, small, muscular, svelte. I want all of it. I want Waifu Zarya, a burly and capable woman. I want Husbando Zangief. If these types of characters were in the game, it would make those kawaii characters even cuter. There are still characters I want because of how they look, but I'm not convinced the introduction of new characters will do anything for me if they follow this design trend. Seeing as these are the leaked characters for the next update, things aren't looking good. If this sort of style is your thing, then you'll love Genshin, and you're probably already playing it. But casual weebs like myself may be disappointed once you realize all the characters kinda look the same.
Are you hurt?
Genshin Impact is an anime. I don't mean like Genshin uses anime art or tropes. I mean, it's an anime told in the form of a video game. This includes fan service, filler, arcs, structure, and the oh so lovely tell don't show storytelling. Similar to how mobile gacha games like Fate and Granblue Fantasy are visual novels with JRPG gameplay, Genshin is a fantasy anime set in an open world video game. As such, the story is mostly mediocre with a ton of expository dialogue, most of which is nonsense words about the world and its major players.
The conflict between Mondstadt and Snezhnaya stems from the conflict between the 7 nations and their respective gods. The cryo gods Fatui seem to be after the Animo god's power.
The main issue, other than it throws way too many words at you, is that they'll introduce a villain and expect you to care about their life story.
At last, Mondstadt's rodent ruler in the flesh.
This person is one of the 7 queens of the Dark Order who control the such and such, who are responsible for the destruction of oh my god, I don't care. In traditional RPG fashion, the characters and side stories are much more interesting, but naturally, there isn't enough of that content to balance out the exhausting main plot. As indicated by a trailer MiHoYo put out, the story has only just begun. There are new lands to explore, more characters to meet and collect, and this has me genuinely excited. What doesn't have me excited is the implication that the main thread will be stretched across the next year or 2 of updates. So yeah, if you need a good story to stay engaged with a game, you might find yourself falling off of Genshin. One last thing about the story, the way it's presented is just goofy. Because there are a lot of cutscenes and more planned for the future, 99% of the scenes imply that the characters are doing something that they clearly aren't.
This is absolutely delicious. I'll admit it, I was beaten by the best.
Losing is no fun, but it was worth it for the chance to eat such superb cooking. Please, Shanling, I want some more.
This is gorgeous too! Such a perfectly layered texture.
I know this is to save time on animating the characters, actually eating or holding something, but it's odd nonetheless. Just imagine if Geralt in The Witcher 3 had a conversation about a potion he was drinking, but he was just standing there doing nothing, it makes the long and boring cutscenes that much less enjoyable.
Here, let me give you this.
This is a...
As I alluded to in the beginning, Genshin Impact is a gacha game. Every other review for the game will tell you that you can easily play and beat the game without paying a penny, and this is technically true. But that's like a way worse version of saying it's just cosmetic, because it's not. At all. These are functionally unique characters, and some are straight up better than others. But because it's a gacha game made by Eastern devs, it gets a pass, right? Depending on when you start Genshin, you'll be given a handful of characters that aren't technically free. In the early stages, you will accrue a large bounty of free gacha pulls and currency used to buy said gacha. The catch is that 2/3 of the waifus will be totally unattainable unless you pay up. The catch of the catch is that you could spend thousands of dollars and still not have all of the characters, let alone the one that you want. This has led players to re-rolling accounts in order to take advantage of that early bonus to get their desired team. I've seen posts from players who've made more than 50 accounts before they pulled a 5-star character, and they still weren't totally happy with what they got. There are currently 8 5-star characters, which means a third of the roster is nearly impossible to get. When I say nearly impossible, what I technically mean is that you have a 0.6% chance. Even 4-star characters only have a 5.1% chance, which is much lower than you might think the second best tier would be. The gacha does have a pity system, with guaranteed 4-star characters or weapons showing up after 10 pulls, and 5 stars showing up after, wait for it, 90 pulls. 90 pulls! Based on the Vegas level of rarity 5 stars have, hitting that pity pull is common, which means you could easily spend hundreds of dollars and have little to show for it. Long story short, spending money on Genshin is not worth it at all. It's not worth it at all. It's also worth pointing out that I can see the developers tweaking this system in order to get freeloaders like myself to pay up. Currently, the math is so damn bad that you're either hardcore simping for virtual waifus, or you've never been duped by loot boxes before and think you're gonna be the lucky one. You're not gonna be the lucky one. So save your money and enjoy the plentiful content the game has to offer. I promise you that spending $30 isn't going to make this game any more enjoyable. You might as well spend that on scratch-offs because the drop rates are about the same, but those drops are actual dollars. I know for a lot of this video I've been hard on Genshin, but harsh criticism is missing from most other reviews. Many of them are like, yeah, it's a great game, 8 out of 10, check it out. And I agree, but it's important to talk about these issues as well. I earnestly enjoy my time with it and look forward to future content. It's clear there's a lot missing, but what's there and offered for free is super enjoyable and addictive. Aspects like the story and gacha don't do the game any favors, but they also don't take away from the beautiful world or fun combat. Considering the episodic nature of the game, there isn't really an endgame. Go play something else until they've added more content. This isn't an MMO. It's not going to replace Final Fantasy XIV. You're going to get bored with it, and that's okay. If you're looking for a fun, open world action game with cute anime girls, it's available for free with Genshin Impact. The absence of a ton of content makes it impossible to give a solid conclusion or rating, but I absolutely recommend starting your adventure. I hope this review was illuminating and that I answered some questions other reviews didn't. If you'd like to see more in-depth reviews, then please subscribe to the channel. It really helps. If you like this review, then be sure to leave a like, and if you dislike this review, then go ahead, click the thumbs down. I dare ya. you'd only be helping me in the eternal battle against El Algoritmo. Bye.